Hey there, all you magnificent musical merrymakers. Welcome back to Broadway by Ghostlight. I'm Mark Bonanni, and this is episode 38 of Broadway Jeopardy, the most phantasmagorical theater trivia game show in YouTube history.
Is it though?
If you're a fan of musicals and Broadway, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. I've got 26 all-new Broadway brainbusters waiting for you, so rouge your knees, roll your stockings down, and let's get right into this week's game. This is Broadway Jeopardy! Looking at the categories for today, we start off as always with last week's final Jeopardy category, which is the Oscars. This coming Sunday is the 97th Annual Academy Awards, so we're looking at some movie musicals that have been honored with Oscars throughout the years. After that, we have British Imports, a returning category looking at some shows that came to Broadway via London. Next up after that is the John Golden Theatre. Earlier this week, the John Golden Theatre, one of Broadway's 41 theaters, celebrated its 98th birthday, so we're exploring some plays and musicals that opened at the venue. Then we have Cinderella's, looking at different musical adaptations of the famous fairy tale. And last but not least, we have National Susan Day. Today, February 27th, is National Susan Day, so I thought we'd look at some musical theater characters named Susan. And we end with the final Jeopardy round, so make sure and keep track of your scores so you can wager some of your fake dough on that final clue. We start off, of course, with the $200 round, or the Overture round as I call it, where the questions are hopefully easy enough for most of you to score big before I callously rip it away from you with the harder questions later in the game. Starting off in the film world with the Oscars category, your first $200 clue is... This razzle-dazzle Best Picture winner from 2002 is an adaptation of the 1975 Kander and Ebb musical. What is Chicago? A film version of the 1975 musical had been bouncing around Hollywood since the musical first premiered, with Bob Fosse, of course, set to adapt the stage musical to film. With Fosse's death in 1987, that seemingly ended the musical's big screen dreams. But after the hugely successful Encore's revival of Chicago in 1996, along with the nation's renewed fascination with fame and murder in the form of the O.J. Simpson trial, Chicago was back on everybody's lips. A version seemed likely starring Goldie Hawn as Velma, Madonna as Roxy, Rosie O'Donnell as Matron Mama Morton, John Travolta as Lawyer Billy Flynn, and Nathan Lane as Amos. But the horrible Harvey Weinstein managed to screw that up. Luckily though, we of course did get a wonderful adaptation from Rob Marshall in 2002. Next up in the British Imports category, your next $200 clue is... Though West End icon Michael Ball led the cast of this 2002 movie musical stage adaptation in London, the real star was a flying car. What is Chitty Chitty Bang Bang? Based, of course, on the 1968 family film of the same name, the stage adaptation opened in London's West End in 2002, starring Michael Ball as Caraticus Potts, as well as Brian Blessed as Baron Bombburst, and the Rocky Horror Show's Richard O'Brien as an absolutely terrifying child catcher. The musical would come to Broadway in 2005, starring Raul Esparza, Aaron Dilley, and Mark Kudich. The $200 clue in the John Golden Theatre category is... The posters for this long-running musical warned patrons about the show's full puppet nudity. What is Avenue Q? Avenue Q, which started off-Broadway at the Vineyard Theatre, is the longest-running show to play the John Golden Theatre. With Wicked dominating the musical world again thanks to the film version, the hotly contested 2004 Tony Awards, which saw Avenue Q beat Wicked for Best Musical, is back on everyone's minds. I actually wrote and narrated a whole mini-doc about how Avenue Q pulled that off for another channel, Wait in the Wings, so you can go check out that video there and be sure to comment about how amazing this Mark guy is and demand more content from him. Wink. Heading to our own little corner in the Cinderella's category brings us the $200 clue. Julie Andrews, Leslie Ann Warren, and Brandy have all starred in television versions of Cinderella with a score by this powerhouse duo. Who are Rodgers and Hammerstein? After the huge success of the TV adaptation of Peter Pan with Mary Martin, television studios clamored for more musicals. Rodgers and Hammerstein, arguably the biggest names in musical theater at the time, were sought after to write an original musical at the same time that starred Julie Andrews, still in the massive hit My Fair Lady, was looking for a television vehicle. It was a match made in heaven, and the new musical version of Cinderella aired live on March 31st, 1957, to over 100 million TV sets, the largest televised event in history up to that time.
In my own little corner, in my own little chair, I can be whatever I want to be.
And finishing up the Overture round with the National Susan Day category with the $200 clue. In Meredith Willson's Here's Love, based on the film Miracle on 34th Street, young Susan Walker, along with her mother Doris, don't believe in this man. Who is Santa Claus? The musical version of my personal favorite Christmas movie, Miracle on 34th Street, opened in 1963 and for the most part followed the film's plot pretty closely. You can check out my Broadway breakdown for all the differences, none of them for the better in my opinion. The original cast featured Janice Page as Doris Walker, Lawrence Naismith as Kris Kringle, and Fred Gwynne, best known as Herman Munster, in the supporting role of Marvin Shellhammer. Later in the show's run, Craig Stevens, who played the show's love interest Fred Gailey, was replaced by John Payne, who played the same role of Fred Gailey in the original Miracle on 34th Street film. I hope you all smacked that first round. Let's move on to the only slightly harder $400 round now. Circling back to the Oscars, your first $400 clue is... This 2016 original movie musical was mistakenly announced as that year's Best Picture winner. What is La La Land? The 2016 musical was conceived, written, and directed by Damien Chazelle. He had written the movie back in 2010, but no one seemed interested then. Only after the success of Chazelle's film Whiplash did La La Land get picked up. It was originally set to star Miles Teller, who starred in Whiplash, and Emma Watson, but of course it ended up starring Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone. Heading across the pond to the British imports category gives us the $400 clue. In Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, the pharaoh is modeled after this other king. Who is Elvis Presley is the correct answer. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice utilizes many different genres to make up its score. Besides the Elvis-esque Song of the King, there's also numbers in the style of country western, calypso, French ballads, and 1970s go-go music. Taking our seats for the John Golden Theater category and the $400 clue. This oft-revived play from author David Mamet is set in the cutthroat world of real estate. What is Glengarry Glen Ross? The David Mamet drama first opened at the Golden Theatre in 1984 after first premiering in London at the National Theatre. The original cast included Joe Mantegna and Robert Prosky. The play was revived on Broadway in 2005 starring Liev Schreiber and Alan Alda, in 2012 starring Al Pacino and Bobby Cannavale, and set to return to Broadway this year at the giant Palace Theatre, not a venue known for hosting many plays, starring Bob Odenkirk and Kieran Culkin. The $400 clue for the Cinderella's category is... Andrew Lloyd Webber's take on the classic fairy tale, appropriately named this in the States, starred Lynette Henao in the title role on Broadway. What is Bad Cinderella? When the new Lloyd Webber musical opened in London's West End in 2021, it was simply titled Cinderella and starred Carrie Hope Fletcher in the title role. This take on the classic tale is set in the town of Belleville, where beauty is revered above all else. In this world, Prince Charming seemingly died in battle, and the queen's younger son, the gangly Prince Sebastian, is the one in need of a wife. Cinderella in this version is a gothish misfit who the whole town dislikes. The musical, which Lloyd Webber notably referred to as a costly mistake, played about a year in the West End and then crossed the pond to Broadway in 2023, now called Bad Cinderella, an omen indeed. The show did considerably worse in the US, playing less than 4 months, including previews.
I am bad Cinderella, got a style of my own, and I will not change it for you. I am bad Cinderella, flying high and alone. You can bet I will ignore you.
And the final $400 clue in the National Susan Day category is: in this classic musical, Susan and Peter assure Robert that they remain close despite recently getting divorced. What is company? Susan and Peter casually slip their recent divorce into a conversation with Bobby during dinner, much to Bobby's surprise. But they tell him they still plan on living together for the sake of their family, and they seem happier than ever. The original Susan on Broadway was Merle Louise, who would go on to create the roles of the beggar woman in Sweeney Todd and Cinderella's mother / Little Red Riding Hood's granny in Into the Woods, all of course written by Stephen Sondheim. She also created roles in the original productions of La Cage aux Folles and Kiss of the Spider Woman. Merle Louise sadly passed away just this last month at the age of 90. Leaping right into the $600 round now, back in the Oscars category, your $600 clue there is: though this 2001 jukebox movie musical lost the Best Picture race at the Oscars, its stage adaptation did win Best Musical at the 2021 Tony Awards. What is Moulin Rouge? The frenetic movie musical by Baz Luhrmann was the film that heralded the return of the movie musical back into the cultural spotlight. As you might imagine, given the film's huge success, a stage adaptation was discussed as early as 2002 when Baz Luhrmann announced he was working on one that he himself would direct, and reportedly the filmmaker had even approached the film's stars Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor about reprising their roles on stage. Incredibly, the musical would take over 17 years to reach the stage. The $600 clue in the British imports category is: this Andrew Lloyd Webber musical combined the one-act song cycle Tell Me on a Sunday with a ballet set to Webber's Variations. What is song and dance? The first act, the song part of the evening, was written for performer Marty Webb in 1979 and was filmed for British television under the name Tell Me on a Sunday. The second act, the dance part of the evening, utilized Andrew Lloyd Webber's album Variations based on the music of Puccini and was written by Lloyd Webber for his brother Julian, a cellist. It was prolific producer Cameron Mackintosh who proposed combining Tell Me on a Sunday with a dance piece, making it a complete evening's entertainment. The complete song and dance opened in the West End in 1982 with Marty Webb for Act 1 and Wayne Sleep and Jane Darling dancing Act 2. The show reached Broadway in 1985 starring Bernadette Peters for most of the show's year-plus run, though for the last 4 weeks of the run, Betty Buckley starred in the show. Heading to the 1990s with the John Golden Theater category and the $600 clue: in William Finn's Falsettos, Marvin leaves his wife to be with this man. Who is Whizzer is the right answer. Radically modern for its time, Whizzer and Marvin have a tumultuous relationship to be sure. The show's first act, March of the Falsettos, shows Marvin and Whizzer's relationship go from an adulterous one to an uneasy monogamous one before Marvin and Whizzer eventually split up. Act 2, Falsetto Land, finds the pair reconciling after a few years apart, but sadly Whizzer contracts AIDS, though not explicitly named in the show, and succumbs to the illness in a beautifully tragic ending. The original Whizzer was Stephen Bogardus, who originated the role in the off-Broadway productions of both March of the Falsettos and Falsetto Land. For the acclaimed 2016 revival of Falsettos, Andrew Rannells played the part of Whizzer, earning a Tony nomination. Hurrying to the Cinderella's category before the clock strikes midnight gives us the $600 clue. In The Apple Tree, the show's third act is about Ella, a chimney sweep who is transformed by her friendly neighborhood godmother into a glamorous movie star named This. What is Passionella is the answer. The Apple Tree is a 3-act musical where the 3 different stories presented have virtually nothing to do with each other. The final act is named Passionella and is based on the Cinderella-inspired story by Jules Feiffer. The hilarious story follows Ella, a dirty, nerdy chimney sweep who is transformed by her friendly neighborhood godmother into Passionella, a gorgeous bombshell with huge star quality. The brilliant Barbara Harris originated the role, and her rendition of the song Gorgeous when she first transforms is a favorite of mine.
I am gorgeous. I am absolutely gorgeous. There's this avalanche of beauty in one woman, and I'm it. Look at the way all of them are split. They're stunning. See the way my nose stopped running. I was positive this creature was there inside the old me. All bottled up, waiting to get free. Now I see the real me.
Tell your friend Susan that her category is up now with the $600 clue. This British musical about the life of Britain's Got Talent contestant Susan Boyle is named after the show tune that made her famous. What is I Dreamed a Dream is the answer. Susan Boyle rocketed to fame during the 3rd season of Britain's Got Talent with her rendition of I Dreamed a Dream from the musical Les Miserables. Her debut album, also called I Dreamed a Dream, was one of the best-selling albums of the 21st century with well over 10 million copies sold. The stage musical, which toured the UK in 2012, was based on Boyle's 2010 autobiography called The Woman I Was Born to Be. The original idea was to have Miss Boyle play herself in the show, but it was later decided to have a trained actor in the role, with Elaine C. Smith playing the part in the original cast. Susan Boyle, however, did appear in the show, coming out at the end of the evening as herself, performing 2 numbers, including the title one. It's time to really turn up the heat with the $800 round now, but before we do, please take this opportunity to hit that like button for me if you're enjoying this week's game. It really helps these videos get shown to more fine folks like yourselves, but also makes me feel like it's National Mark Day. Thank you all, I really do appreciate it. Okay, everyone clicked it? Alright, let's keep on keeping on. Looking at an early winner in the Oscars category, your $800 clue there is... This early movie musical from 1929 was only the 2nd recipient of the Best Picture Oscar, the first film with sound to win the award. What is the Broadway Melody? The first ever movie musical from MGM, the Broadway Melody is about 2 sisters from vaudeville who try to make it big on Broadway. The success of the film led to a tsunami of backstage set movie musicals. Hollywood released over 100 movie musicals in the year 1930 alone, essentially choking the desire from them from the public, leading to only 14 movie musicals being made in 1931. Popping back into the British imports category brings us the $800 clue. Though pop star Boy George starred in Taboo on Broadway, which told his life story, he did not play himself, but instead portrayed this outrageous performance artist. Who is Lee Bowery? The original London production of Taboo was remarkably different from the version seen on Broadway. The original version focused on an original character, Billy, a photographer who leaves home in the 1980s and mixes in with the new romantic underground movement and its prominent figures, including Boy George and Lee Bowery. For Broadway, the whole Billy plot was cut, focusing the evening on Boy George himself and his development. I actually preferred the London version of the show, having seen both, but that's of course just my opinion. Exploring another play in the John Golden Theater category with the $800 clue. This play by Terence McNally originally starred Audra McDonald and Zoe Caldwell as famed opera diva Maria Callas. What is Masterclass is the correct answer. The 1995 play imagines the real-life grand opera diva towards the end of her life, giving a masterclass to some young opera singers while traversing her memories of her storied career. The play originally starred Zoe Caldwell as Maria Callas, with a young Audra McDonald as one of her students. Zoe Caldwell was replaced by Patti LuPone and later Dixie Carter during the run, with Faye Dunaway leading the national tour. An excellent revival from the Manhattan Theatre Club played Broadway in 2011, starring Tyne Daly as Maria Callas, with Alexandra Silber and Sierra Boggess as some of her students.
I pointed to the general manager in his box, the same man who had said my services at his theatre were no longer necessary, and hurled the words right at him. I don't know what came over me. I was possessed like a fury. And I went down to the stage apron, just meters from where he was sitting, and I sang, Il palco funesto. The audience gasped. Ghiringhelli reeled from the force of it. They say it was the greatest ovation in the history of La Scala. He ordered them to ring down the fire curtain to stop my applause.
Finish up your chores and get ready for the $800 clue in the Cinderellas category, which is... This movie musical take on Cinderella starred Gemma Craven and Richard Chamberlain and boasted a score by the Sherman Brothers. What is The Slipper and the Rose is the correct answer. The British film musical was released in 1976. As the clue stated, the score for the fairy tale musical was by the Sherman Brothers, Robert and Richard Sherman, most famous for their work with Disney on films like Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. The Slipper and the Rose was chosen for a Royal Command performance and was highly complimented by the Queen Mother, who called the waltz featured in the film the most beautiful song she ever heard. I very much enjoyed The Slipper and the Rose, and I recommend you checking it out. And going side by the National Susan Day category gives us the $800 clue. The incredible Susan Blackwell introduced this inspiring ode to slaying one's inner demons in the musical Title of Show. What is Die Vampire Die? As stated in the song, a vampire in this case is any person, thought, or feeling that stands between you and your creative self-expression. Susan lists several such vampires, such as the air freshener vampire who wants to sanitize and clean up creative works, and the mother of all vampires, the vampire of despair, which tells you things like you'll never be good enough. The song, besides being extremely catchy, is also an incredible life lesson, and one that should be on every creative person's frequent listening playlist. Susan Blackwell later created entire workshops around the song, helping creatives identify and vanquish their vampires. And I just love the song and Susan Blackwell so much. I actually did one of her workshops back in the day. And if you ever get a chance to work with Susan Blackwell, I highly recommend it. She's incredible.
And when they come run like hell, see those bats in your belfry, then call on Van Helsing. In swoosh, vampires, in a whoosh, babaganoosh, filling you with thoughts of self-consciousness, feelings of worthlessness. They'll make you second guess, die them higher.
We've reached that point now, my friends. The big show, the main event. It's the $1,000 round. Give me that dramatic music. Best of luck, players. Rolling out the red carpet one last time for the Oscars category and the $1,000 clue. The 1944 Best Picture winner, Going My Way, was a musical about a priest taking over a new parish that starred this crooner. Who is Bing Crosby? Going My Way was the biggest hit of 1944, and the film musical was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, winning 7, including a Best Actor trophy for Bing Crosby. A TV series based on the film had 1 season consisting of 30 episodes in 1962, and starred none other than Gene Kelly as Father O'Malley. The $1,000 clue, or roughly £789 clue, in the British Imports category is... This musical is based on the 1904 Puccini opera, Madama Butterfly. What is Miss Saigon is the answer. The epic mega musical from Claude Michel Schonberg and Alain Boublil, the team behind Les Miserables, opened in London in 1989 before transferring to Broadway in 1991. The musical made a star of its young leading lady, Lea Salonga, who was 18 when Miss Saigon first opened. The 2014 revival of the musical would do the same for its new young star, a then 17-year-old Eva Noblezada, who would go on to star in Hadestown and The Great Gatsby on Broadway. One last trip to the John Golden Theater gives us the $1,000 clue. This Tony-nominated musical revue from 1980 featured songs from the turn of the century, with its cast of 5 playing various historical figures. What is tintypes is the answer. Okay, that was a hard one. You can all yell at me through the screen for that one. As the clue stated, Tintypes was a review of almost 50 songs from composers like George M. Cohan, Victor Herbert, Scott Joplin,
and John Philip Sousa.
The Tony-nominated show was filmed for television in 1982 with the original cast returning, which included Jerry Zaks, Trey Wilson, and Lynn Thigpen. The $1,000 clue for the Cinderellas category is... Based on the 1998 film of the same name, this musical premiered at the Paper Mill Playhouse in 2015, starring Margot Siebert as Danielle de Barbarac, James Snyder as Prince Henry, and Tony Sheldon as Leonardo da Vinci. What is Ever After is the answer. Based on the Drew Barrymore Angelica Houston film, this Cinderella take was set to reach the stage as early as 2007, but was postponed indefinitely. The project was revived in 2013 in a reading which featured Sierra Boggess and Jeremy Jordan in the leading roles. The musical would finally bow at the Paper Mill Playhouse in 2015, and besides the 3 stars mentioned in the clue, the show also starred Christine Ebersol as the wicked stepmother, and Charles Shaughnessy, best known for playing Mr. Sheffield on The Nanny, played the king. Another production of Ever After played the Alliance Theater in Atlanta, Georgia in 2019, with Sierra Boggess returning from the 2013 reading. But as of now, there are no plans to bring the show to Broadway. And the curtain call clue in the National Susan Day category for $1,000 is... This 1948 musical, with a score by Kurt Weill and Alan J. Lerner, starred Nanette Fabray as Susan, who, along with her husband Sam, never age as the story progresses from 1791 all the way through 1948. What is Love Life is the answer. One of the earliest examples of a, quote, concept musical. I really hate that term, but that's a topic for another day. As the clue stated, the musical takes place from 1791 all the way through the then modern day 1948, but the central married couple never age. Besides the crazy plot of looking at the challenges of marriage through vast amounts of time and changing social mores, there was also detached numbers that commented on the action, similar to what the musical Cabaret would do almost 20 years later. The Little Sea musical is finally coming back to New York soon as part of the City Center Encore series. It was supposed to be a part of the 2020 Encore series, but was of course canceled due to the pandemic. But it's finally happening this season, starring Kate Baldwin and Nicholas Christopher as the longtime married couple Susan and Sam Cooper, with Tony winner Victoria Clark directing. We've reached the final Jeopardy round, players. Time to tally up those scores and decide how confident you feel in the category Stephen Schwartz, looking at shows with music and/or lyrics by the wonderful composer and lyricist. Okay, has everyone made their wagers? Annie? Edmund? Susan? Okay, here is your final clue. This 1986 musical, with a score by Charles Strauss and Stephen Schwartz, was nominated for Best Musical despite only running for 4 official performances. What is Rags is the answer. Rags mostly focuses on Rebecca Hershkowitz, a Jewish woman who, along with her young son, has just immigrated to America from Russia in order to find a better life, as well as her husband Nathan, who left for America sometime before but had lost contact with his family. The musical failed to find an audience in 1986 when it opened, and the musical was forced to close after 18 previews and 4 performances. Despite the super short run, the musical picked up 5 Tony nominations that year. Rags became one of those musicals with a strong, much revered score that is reworked time and time again in hopes of fixing the show. A later, drastically revised version, which threw out the original book by Joseph Stein for a new one by David Thompson, was presented at the Goodspeed Opera House in 2017, with a new plot, new characters, and even some new songs. And that's this week's game! How did you all fare this week? Did you go from rags to riches, or did you dream a dream of clues gone by? Be sure to let me know in the comments how you did. I love hearing from you guys and seeing your scores. Next Thursday, after the episode goes live, I'll be doing a Patreon-only live stream where I'll be hanging out and answering some questions for all my wonderful and supportive patrons at every level. So if you want to be a part of that or any of the fun things going on over at Patreon, be sure to check out the link in the video description. And of course, a huge thank you from the bottom of my Broadway-loving heart to all my amazing patrons. I love you all. You can support Broadway Jeopardy by sharing these videos with every Susan you know, and, other named people as well, I suppose. I'd really love to grow the audience for this channel, but it's a struggle, and I sure could use everyone's help. There's also a link in the video description to my merch shop if you want to check that out. You can follow me over on Blue Sky if you want to connect in the social media sphere. I'll be back next week with episode 39, but until then, I'm Mark Benani. This is Broadway by Ghostlight. Thanks for playing.